Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I am Bill, the company's expert, and welcome to the live stream I'm doing a couple of times weekly, where we talk about careers and job search and job interviews and resumes and networking and all that fun stuff. But we do it with a little bit of a twist, and that is that we're going to try and cut through a lot of the misinformation, a lot of the dishonesty, and a lot of the crap, and tell it like it really is from both sides of the table. If you are between jobs right now and you are frustrated with the job search process and it's not really going too well and you're feeling about this tall, I got news for you. You are highly employable and highly hireable. You're an awesome person. You're also trying to seek help. You're doing some self-improvement. And for that reason, I know you're awesome. There's a job out there for you. There's somebody out there right now that's trying to hire someone just like you. And the only problem is that you're looking over here and they're looking over here and you're just not connecting. That's the big issue. So welcome to this. This is an interactive live stream. So if you see my face, you should see a chat box somewhere nearby. Get in the chat box. Let me know what you're wondering about. Let me know what you're struggling with, and I'll do my best to help you out. The title of this episode is, originally enough, The Hiring Process Sucks. Episode number 10. This is the 10th episode of Honest HR Nitrous we've done so far. And I originally was going to call this Honest HR Plastique, which I think is a better name. But I don't think a lot of people would get it. But there you go. Yes. So I guess we'll just launch right into the topic. And if you have any questions, if you have any specific things you're wondering about, get in the chat. I will help you out. Without any further ado, let's take it away. So the hiring process sucks. Why does the hiring process suck? Maybe you have had direct experience in this recently. Well, first of all, for a lot of people, it's confusing. And there's many reasons for why it's confusing. One is that it's just stupid and it's unintuitive and there's no reason for it to work that way, but it does. So that's part of the reason. The other reason is that I don't feel that a lot of people have really been prepared. They've really been educated on this properly when they were in school. You know, you might have been told a few things about job search, but I feel that what I've heard that people are told, they're incomplete, they're misleading, and they're not the whole story. There's forces in play that they're not telling you about, and reasons behind things that they're not telling you about. And that's one of the big ones. You know, the hiring process, a lot of times, is very unprofessional. I mean, obviously I've got a chip on my shoulder. You can tell by me doing live streams like this one. In my early career, I encountered a lot of unprofessional recruiters, people that were absolutely incompetent, people that didn't have a clue what they were doing, but yet still managed to act in an extremely arrogant, disrespectful way. They're an absolute nightmare to deal with. And it's all the more harmful when you're encountering them at the moment that you have like the lowest self-esteem you feel about this tall, right? Right in that moment, you might be between jobs, right? You're not at your best. You're at your most vulnerable. And then you got to deal with these clowns, right? So that's another reason why it sucks. And the third reason, I mean, there's probably a whole bunch more than three, but the third reason is that it's ineffective. People that work in universities, people with doctors of business, you know, they have PhDs in business administration. And as a result, they work in universities doing research on how business works. And one element of business is HR, and one element of HR is recruitment and selection. And HR is actually an area, not that this is obvious, but it's an area where they're doing a lot of research and innovation in, because it's one of the most inefficient areas where you have the most to gain by fixing it, right? And recruitment and selection is one of those areas where they've done a lot of data-driven research on this, and they've known for a very long time with data, with quantifiable results that are peer-reviewed. The job interviews are very ineffective at really being able to find out if a candidate is good or not. You know what I mean? It's like performance reviews, same problem. And I've talked about both of these in the past. They've known that they're very, very ineffective. If that's the case, why are they still used? It's because there's no practical alternative. There are alternatives, but they would require a ton more manual work. You'd have to put in way more hours, and they're just not prepared to do that. So that's why we're stuck with job interviews in their current form and performance reviews in their current form while we're at it. I see there are 10 people here. Thank you for joining me today. Get in the chat. Let me know what you're wondering about, struggling with. I really didn't intend this to be a monologue. I'd much rather interact with people. So get in the chat and let me know if there's a specific thing that you're dealing with, and let's get into it. Just to kick us off here about the fact that the job interview process and the hiring process sucks, there's 6 areas where we could talk about. You could go through each of these and find multiple flaws with each one. Applying for a job, right? First of all, dealing with recruiters. You have a whole gold mine there. Interviews, doing the job interviews, right? Whether it's structured, a formal interview with a recruiter and a hiring manager, or if you're sort of climbing the ladder and you're doing, more of the informal interviews, which they tend to do at more the upper middle management and executive level, right? The outcome of interviews, like trying to understand what went wrong, what went right, what was the result. A lot of people don't understand how they did, that kind of thing. That includes like the communication between you and the recruiter, ghosting, all that kind of stuff, getting ghosted. Offers and negotiation. I did a live stream earlier today, like an hour ago. We were talking about salary negotiation. So we touched on a little bit of that. But that's a process fraught with errors. And then once you actually start in a new job, the onboarding process, right? All that's still part of the hiring process, where they train you and they get you over the learning curve and you learn the culture and all this kind of stuff, right? So that whole process, that's 6 steps. Each step is like a whole gold mine to what you could talk about how it's done wrong, and some horror stories of each one. I'm sure you guys have horror stories. Nobody's in the chat. That's kind of unusual. Usually we get more of a interaction there going, and that gives me something to react to and play off. In the meantime, then, I will mention that if you want to go deeper, you've watched some of my job interview videos, and you want to go deeper, and you're dissatisfied with your progress so far on your job search, check out these courses, especially this one here, my Get Hired course. That's basically all my advice in one place, step by step, principle by principle. And you can use that to write your resume, do your cover letter, prepare for interviews, and deal with job offers. So check that out if you really want a sort of template to go off as a guide to go down this process. You can. And the other thing that's in that course is I talk about networking, because for those of you who know this, great, you're in tune. But for those of you who don't, the most common way that people get jobs is some form of networking, okay? A lot of people that are not really used to doing networking, they're surprised by that. But if you go to people that have jobs now and you ask them, how did you get your job? Chances are, the odds are, the most likely thing they're going to say is some form of networking. They knew someone who, brought this job to their attention or put in a good word for them. Maybe a former coworker or former boss, something like that. That's what most people are going to say. So if that's surprising to you, I got good news for you, okay? And that is that of all the jobs that you see posted, if you're just applying to job postings, okay, all those job postings that you see, they represent only 20% or so of the jobs that are actually out there. Okay, what you're seeing is only 20% of what's actually out there. The other 80% are in something that's called the hidden job market, which is kind of a bad name for it. It just means that those jobs exist, but they're not posted publicly. Usually the reason for that is because you don't need to post them publicly because they're very good jobs. All you have to do is mention to the people you work with that, we have a job here, or I've just created a job if you're a manager. And then the manager will be given all kinds of suggestions. Hey, I've got a brother, I've got a friend, I've got an ex-coworker that might be good for this. So if you're getting inundated with those, why would you then pay to post the job publicly so you can get inundated with thousands of applications from strangers, right? So that's why a lot of the great jobs are not posted. So this is good. This is good news for you because it means that you have a whole gold mine waiting for you to explore, okay? So if you're not tuned into this, there's a lot of great things out there. It's just a matter of knowing where they are, knowing where to look, and putting yourself forward for them. Okay, we do have people in the chat. This is awesome, finally. Okay, Patricia says, question. My relative has had experience as a Starbucks manager for 7 years and retail and does not know how to sell her skills to move up. She is looking for a new job, but people lowball her. Okay, listen. Something that I've learned over the course of my life, I fortunately learned this earlier on, was that being able to sell yourself, like your skills, is extremely important, okay? Let me ask you a rhetorical question here. How about this? Let's say that you were a genius, you had incredible capabilities, you were more productive than anyone else, you were smarter than anyone else, you could do things that nobody else could do, but you're alone in your basement. Nobody knows about you. Nobody knows that you have these abilities. Nobody knows how good you are. You know nobody, so you wouldn't be able to reach out to someone that could help you or, that knows that you're awesome, right? How far do you think you would go? And you are unable to make a good impression to anyone else to get them to believe in you after they meet you. Okay, you can't sort of impress upon anyone how awesome you truly are, right? How far do you think you would get? Probably not very far, right? Obviously, you need two things. You need more than one thing. You need to be awesome, and then you also need to convince others that you don't know that you're awesome, right? So being able to sell yourself, being able to make a good impression to other people that you just met and convince them that you're a highly capable, highly talented person who can maybe solve their problems or solve a problem that they're having, right? Obviously, that would be a tremendous skill, right? That would help you, okay? So Patricia, I mean, it seems like you already appreciate the problem that your relative has. The good news is that these skills really aren't rocket science. If you're maybe a technical type person or you're maybe an introvert. Now I'm both. I'm a technical introvert. I always have been. That's just the type of person I am. But what I learned early on, like in my 20s, was that these skills are really not that hard. You can easily tack them on. And practice makes perfect. You learn the theory and then you go out and you apply it, right? Things like how to be likable, how to persuade somebody, how to sell yourself, okay, your abilities. Like, for example, job search is a quest to sell yourself and your abilities, right? You're basically going to people and saying, hey, Forget about all the other candidates. You need to hire me. And let me tell you why. First of all, I got all these skills, all these abilities. I got all this stuff, but I can use it to solve your problem. And not only that, but you get to work with me, and I'm awesome. We're going to get along great, and I'll be a pleasure to deal with. And we just click, you know? And then when you leave, they think, man, I'm sad that conversation's over. I like talking to them. They made me feel really good, right? It's not that hard to do if you know how. It's just knowing how and then going out and practicing it a few times, and you'll be surprised how good you get at it. And there's a lot of resources around to help you with this. So I don't know if there's any more to that story, Patricia, but yeah, if someone doesn't see your value, they don't see how awesome you are, then it follows that if this is a job interview type situation and they make you an offer, they would lowball you because they don't see you as being that valuable. The other kind of side to that is that, just so you know, I mean, hopefully you're aware of this, maybe you're not, but in job interviews, recruiters behave just like you. Okay, when you go to the store and you can buy something like I was talking about this like an hour ago, you want to buy, I don't know, a can of baked beans or something, you know, right? If you're that type of person that's like really into beans, and you got to have your beans, so you go to the store and they're selling a can of baked beans for $8, but around the corner they're also selling, another store is selling that can of baked beans for $5. Where would you buy it from? You'd get it from the store that's selling it for $5, right? Recruiters are just like you. When they're hiring, they're trying to fill a position with a new employee. And if they can get someone that can do the job, but you could get them for cheap, that's what they'd prefer to do, right? So if they're making you a job offer, if they've decided you're the one, right? You know, you look like the best of all the people we talk to. We think you are probably the one that's going to work, has the highest likelihood of working out. We're going to make you an offer, and we're going to try and get you for as cheaply as possible. And so what they usually do is they offer a low price at the beginning, because the reality is that most candidates will just blindly accept. Most candidates won't make a counteroffer and try and negotiate, right? In which case, for most of the time, they get someone for cheap. And then the recruiter looks like a real champion to their boss. They look really good because they said, hey, not only did I fill the position that you had with a suitable candidate, but I got them for cheap. They're doing the job and you're not paying through the nose to get them. And the recruiter looks like a hero, right? So they're always going to try for this, right? Right? So that's kind of the default position that, you're going to see. Peace be with you says, are Zoom interviews more indicative of possible being hired versus telephone screening interviews? Not necessarily. They can be, but I mean, it depends on the situation. If it's a Zoom screening interview, which there are, then I don't think it's any more or less likely to hire you based on that. All it means is that they're seeing the candidates or they have potential to see the candidates. And sometimes that can help you and sometimes it doesn't make any difference. So there's nothing inherent in whether it's Zoom or plain old telephone call that says there's the greater or lesser likelihood of being hired. Some companies do all their screening interviews on Zoom. So if you're dealing with them, then obviously it doesn't matter. Jared is back. Jared says, hi there, remember me? Yes, I do. I wanted to elaborate on my previous line of questions, if you don't mind. Sure, but maybe just do a quick recap. Jared says, I'm being interviewed by 2 managers during my upcoming interview. Okay, so it's one interview, 2 managers sitting across the table from you, I guess, right? So I'll be talking to them both at the same time. Any advice for this kind of interview? Yeah, I've done videos on that. It's a panel interview, right? anytime you're talking to more than one person, at least I use the term panel interview. It's an interview with multiple people sitting on the other side of the table. Listen, although it can be slightly psychologically more intimidating, I suppose, talking to more than one person, you got a couple there or several. The best is when you walk into a room and there's one of those conference tables that are long, thin conference tables. So you're on one side and you've got 6 people on the other staring you down. Those are fun. So psychologically, it can feel, a little bit more intimidating. But the reality is that they're pretty much the same as talking to a single person. You conduct yourself the same way. You ask the same questions. You give the same answers. It's the same thing. It's just that there happens to be 2 people or 3 people, whatever, instead of 1. Okay. Now, the good thing about panel interviews is that if there's more than one person there, what that usually means is that there's more likelihood that you will have a rapport with somebody on the other side of the table, right? If you have an accountant and a manager and a recruiter and the owner of the company sitting on the other side of the table, chances are you'll be able to relate to one of those people depending on, the details and who you are, right? So this is good. You have more chances of hitting it off with somebody, right? So in your case, maybe you might relate to one manager and not the other. And this is a good thing, because if you just got the person you didn't relate to, it wouldn't go as well, right? Okay. Now remember, a job interview is always really an exercise in who's the most likable. That's what they're looking for. That's unofficially what job interviews are all about. They're less about your technical qualifications and more about your communication style and your personality and your sense of humor and, do you understand etiquette and protocol and all this kind of stuff, right? So just go in there and try and get a rapport with both people, Now, I said this in a recent video. I think I had a video that came out in the last week or 2 talking about panel interviews where, just based on my experience, I've been in a lot of panel interviews where you're talking to multiple people. And I'm one of those people that I have a problem remembering people's names. It doesn't come naturally to me. And a sign of respect is to remember someone's name. So if you go to a job interview and there's 4 people sitting across the table from you, and they all introduce themselves in turn and you shake hands with them or whatever, right? And they introduce themselves. They say, "Hi, my name is John. Hello, my name is Betty. My name is Frank," whatever. And, I'm the type of person where, they say, "Hi, my name is Frank." And I go, "Oh, Frank." And then like that, you forgot, 5 seconds later, you wouldn't be able to remember their name. So what I found is that if you have a business card, okay, I know this sounds kind of high tech or high level for some people, but if you have a business card, what you do is you take out your business card and you give, when someone introduces themselves, "Hi, I'm Frank." You say, "Oh, Frank, it's good to meet you." And then you give them your business card. That's a cue for them to give you their business card. And in professional situations, a lot of people have business cards. They'll get a company card, right? And so if you're talking to 4 people, when you were doing the introductions, you received 4 business cards from these people. So what you can do is you put them on the table in front of you. So if Frank is over here, I'll put his business card there. If Betty is over here, I'll put her business card right in front here. If Joe or whatever is here, and if, somebody else is here, I'll put their business card. So it solves the problem in large part of remembering people's names and remembering who they are, right? Okay, Betty, you were the recruiter. Frank, you were the owner. Joe, you were the accountant. And, it's hard to remember this when you got a bunch of strangers staring at you and the pressure's on, right? You can't do a lot of original thought under those conditions. Most people can't anyway. I'm no exception. So you arrange them on the table, then you'll never forget anybody's name and you'll never forget who they actually are that you're talking to. And that helps to frame your answers and to frame what you say if you know you're talking to the company owner or you're talking to someone who's going to train you if they do hire you. You know what I mean? Like it helps to know these things. So that's one little tip. Now, if you're worried about the whole business card thing, listen, you can do this all online, and for the equivalent of like $20 or something, you can print yourself up like 500 business cards or whatever it is. Just if you have a LinkedIn profile, take the header of your LinkedIn profile. It's got your name, maybe a tagline, who you are, and then your email address, your contact information, and maybe even a professional photo, and just put those on a business card, right? And then when you go to job interviews, here, hi, it's good to meet you, and then you give your card, right? It helps if you have it in a pocket, like I got a chest pocket on my shirt. That's where I usually put these things. And then wherever you're going, you meet someone, you give them the card, they give you the card. Okay, so anyway, that relates to panel interviews when you're dealing with multiple people. Hopefully that makes sense. I got multiple cameras here. You like this? You can strip away all the crap, right? Refreshing. Peace be with you says, thank you. You're welcome. Peace be with you. David says, what's your take on using, for example, ChatGPT or other tools for preparing a CV or cover letter? I feel that the recruiters may get lots of applications where those may have similar templates and they consider it as a negative point. Yes, listen, I'm doing a live stream in a couple of weeks. It's another collaboration where I'm on the live stream with I think 2 recruiters for this one. And the topic is going to be like what happens to your applications when they get it. What's the process from their perspective, right? Do they look at it first? Does it go through ATS first? How do you get sent an email, if it's a no or if it's a yes? And then if they actually look at it, what do they look for? How long do they look at, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about that. I'm looking forward to doing that. But like, I'm not down with the latest techniques on ChatGPT. It's an incredibly useful tool. There's all kinds of AI tools, and they're coming out with like more every week. It's hard to stay on top of it for me, and I don't try to. But the thing with like ChatGPT and other similar tools is that they're great for producing generic content. So if you're just looking for generic content, something that's good enough but isn't amazing, if that's okay, then it's good for that. You got to put a little effort into it, right? Like what you could do is you could enter in the job description, like the entire text of the job posting, into ChatGPT. And then you can enter in the entire text of your resume that you have of yourself, like a sort of standard resume that you've made. And then say, can you rewrite my resume that's tailored to this particular job? And things like this. Like there's all kinds of tips and tricks you can do, right? But whatever you do, in my opinion, my advice would be don't skip the step at the end where you proofread everything. Like you see what it's done and you maybe tweak it a bit, add, like fix a few things and change some words around and, make sure that the format is good. Because if it's going into an ATS system, then, it really doesn't matter like how it looks for a human that much. If it's got all the keywords and things in it that the ATS system is looking for. You know what I mean? I would use a very simple format. I wouldn't use fancy like text boxes with things all over the page and stuff, especially if there's a chance it could be an ATS system. But the thing I got to say here is that like, it's hard to give like a one size fits all advice. It depends on what you're going for. What I've said would apply to a worker level job that's going in with like 1,000 other candidates into an ATS system before it is looked at by a human. Okay. It would not be necessarily what I would do if you're an executive trying to get a job and sending your resume to, other executives at different companies and things like this. If that's what you were trying to do, you wouldn't use ChatGPT for that. You would, no offense to ChatGPT, but you would do a much better job. Does that make sense? Yeah, like the thing is, okay, you're not necessarily trying to like stand out in the sense that you're going to be the flashiest, the most visible. Like if you want to stand out in a job interview, and when I say stand out, I mean literally stand out. What you would do is you'd show up wearing bright red, you'd show up drunk, you would like dance a jig on the table and collapse unconscious on the floor. That'll be memorable. That'll make you stand out. But is that what gets you the job? No. What gets you the job is being the best fit. So it's not that you're trying to stand out in the sense that you're being the most original or the most noteworthy, newsworthy. You're standing out in the sense that, you meet exactly what they're looking for, exactly, more than anyone else. That's how you stand out, in a true sense, meaning that you get selected, right? So you don't have to, so you can do a ChatGPT resume, but you've got to fix it up. You've got to proofread it, make sure it makes sense and all this at the end. Because ChatGPT excels in like generic things. It tends to water down some stuff too, and besides, ATS systems, a big thing they look for is keywords. So just make sure those keywords are in there and that they're prominent and that they're not watered down with a bunch of extra crap. That's the other thing. Resume 1 has all the keywords they're looking for and is rather short. Resume 2 has all the keywords they're looking for, plus 3 pages of other crap. Which one do you think they're going to select? Resume 1, because it's undiluted. It's what we're looking for with no other baggage. Isn't that stupid? It's counterintuitive, isn't it? But yet, that's the reality. Jared says, thank you for the advice. I've been studying your videos nonstop for preparation. You've got some great... Well, thank you very much, Jared. I'm glad they're useful. Another question. Being so new to the job market, I have very limited stories for potential behavioral questions. Is it okay to answer with what I would do for questions I don't have answers to? Yes, you can do that. And that's certainly a lot better than like saying, I don't know, or I've never done that before. But it would still be better to be able to pull out an experience on demand. Now, Jared, have you been to school? Have you taken like post-secondary education of some kind, like trade school or university or college or whatever? This may be less intuitive, but you can use all of those experiences to draw from, okay? For example, let's say you haven't had a career job, okay? So you've maybe just got a university degree or something, and you're going for your first career job after university, okay? And let's say you've only had like, casual jobs that they give to young people, like paper boy, or, you painted a house, or, casual labor, at a construction site, stuff like that, right? Like not really career related experiences, right? So the problem is you get to the job interview and they say, tell me about a time, you had conflict with a coworker and you had to overcome the conflict using good communication. Tell me about a time you did that, right? And you're thinking, oh crap, like I haven't had a coworker that I had a conflict with, when I was a paper boy. So, how do I answer this question? The reality is maybe during your education, you to complete one of your courses or something, you were assigned some group work, In the educational system, they seem to be really big on group work as we go into the future. I'm kind of more or less against it usually, but anyway, I personally think it's like just laziness on the part of instructors. They don't want to, 5 people doing 5 projects. So they just say, okay, well, you work in groups of 5, and then a group of 5 students does 1 project. It's less to correct, right? I mean, it's stupid, but it's less to correct. So anyway, you've been assigned some group work back when you were in university, and you had to complete a project with 4 other students, and you had to figure out what you're going to do. And maybe there was a difference of opinion where one person said, no, I want to do this. And you said, well, screw that. That's ridiculous. We should do this, right? Well, let's pretend that you overcame it, right? So you get to a job interview for your first career job, and they ask you this question. Tell me about a time, you had a conflict with a coworker, you had to resolve with communication. So you say, well, actually a great example of that was when I was actually back in university, and we were assigned a group project, and I had to work with 4 other students. So we all had to work on this project together. We had to coordinate our work. We had to decide on a topic and an approach and a structure, right? And we had one individual that, had a problem with this. They wanted to do one thing. I wanted to do another thing. And they were really, really adamant about doing it their way. And I was equally adamant, but that is not going to work. And here's what we did, here's what I did. And then bam, bam, bam. I listened to them. I made them feel like they were expressing themselves. I did active listening, blah, blah, blah. I was very respectful, made them feel like, that they were being listened to. And then instead of challenging them directly, I asked them some questions. I said, well, if we take that approach, how would we incorporate this? Because, I'm not sure where that would go. Where would that go? And if we did that, how would we be able to demonstrate this that we're supposed to do? And they didn't have obvious answers, and they started to waffle a bit, and they realized that, okay, maybe this approach I'm pushing for is not the perfect solution that I think it is. And then that sort of broke the ice, and then we sort of came up with a compromise and blah, 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 right? So you're demonstrating this, and the recruiter is getting what they need. They're seeing, you do understand how to smooth over a very contentious situation. You do understand how to reason with somebody and compromise and make a work entity flow, right? Resolve conflict, make people feel like they're a valued member of the group, and so they will want to work with you. And it makes us feel that if we put you in a situation like that, you'd be able to handle it well. So you pass the question, right? And you're not saying what you would do. You're saying no, I did this and I would do it again, right? So it carries more weight because it's not a hypothetical thing. It's an experience, and you're telling a story. Now I'm trying to make this up off the top of my head, so you tell a much more compelling story than I'm doing now. Okay? But you can use all your experiences in your schooling, okay, to demonstrate almost everything that you would need to demonstrate in any behavioral question that you could be asked. Because school, for all intent and purposes, is pretty much exactly like a work environment. You have to have the same qualities, you have to have the same abilities, you have to conduct yourself in the same way, you have to respect deadlines, respect authority, find solutions to problems, work with other people, ask help when you need it, understand the expectations of you, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's all the same things you have to demonstrate to be successful in school as you have to demonstrate to be successful in the workplace. So you can draw from all of that. So do your research, prepare 10 stories, okay? And practice phrasing them in the STAR format or some variant of it. And then when you go down to the job interview, you're going to be pulling out these experiences, these stories. And if half of them come from your schooling, that's not an issue. The important thing is that you have a answer for them right there. Tell me a time about when you had to do this. Oh, well, last year I had to do this. This was the situation. This was the problem. This is what I did. This was the result. So yeah. And they go, okay, you clearly know what you're talking about. Jared says, thank you. I'm definitely taking notes. What's the best fallback response if I can't find a story to tell? Well, the best fallback option, look, okay, since you're asking, this is getting into how to answer behavioral interview questions, right? So for the people that are interested, behavioral interview questions are the questions they ask you where you say, tell me about a time, right? Tell me about a time you did this. There's an infinite number of those questions, right? So it's impossible to prepare a custom story for every possible behavioral interview question they could ask. It's just impossible. So the way you do it is, like I said, you prepare 10 stories, okay? 5 of them should be your greatest moments, like, the times where you accomplished a goal or had an achievement that, you're very proud of, something like that. But the other 5 are going to be different types of situations, like where you had conflicts with people, where something failed and you had to scramble and regroup, or there was a problem and you had to go back and fix it. Okay, so you're going to come with those 10 prepared. And then the idea is that any behavioral question they ask you, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to pull out one of those 10. And you may have to adapt it slightly in how you tell it, right? But you're going to be using one of those 10. Okay? So, for example, the time that you were failing a course, but you realized halfway through the course that you were failing, and you decided, okay, damn it, I'm not going to fail this. And you worked with the instructor after class for like the next 30 days, and you aced all your tests, and you ended up passing the class, okay? And you did this by demonstrating all kinds of great traits. You care, you've got a great work ethic, you can seek out help, you can overcome adversity, you can find solutions to problems, you are adaptable, like whatever it is, you're very diligent, you take initiative, like it demonstrates all these different things. So if they ask you a question on, tell me about a time you showed initiative to do something, you would pull out that story. If they say, tell me about a time that, you had to be, you were thrown into a situation of which you were not expecting, but you still had to rise to the challenge. Tell me about a time you did that. You would pull out that story. You see, it's the answer to multiple questions, right? So if you have 10 stories that are like quite varied, one of those stories will be somewhat of a fit for any question they could possibly ask you. Tell me about a time you showed creativity in solving a problem in a work environment. Well, you tell that story. You say like, well, I'd never done this before, but I figured, extreme measures are necessary to overcome this extreme challenge. So I'm going to have to step out of myself. I'm going to do something I've never done before, and I'm going to have to go after class and work with this professor, and I'm going to have to follow every tip that they give me, do all this extra work that they suggest. I'd never done any of that before. I was quite intimidated by it, but I did it, and I made time. So you're phrasing it in a different way, but it's the same story. So you never have to think of an original story off the top of your head when you got all these people staring at you in a panel job interview. Your fallback option is to use one of those 10. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, so the topic is, I see there's 18 people. Thank you for joining me. A question I would ask is the live stream, the video quality, is it skipping? Because I've noticed in the last couple of weeks there, my live streams, like it's sort of like, freeze like that. And I've taken some steps on my end to try and fix it. I have no idea what could be causing that. I thought it might have been my ISP. So can you give me some feedback? Is the video nice and smooth for you guys, or is it skipping all over the place? Let me know in the chat if you can. Yeah, that's the idea, Jared. It's because like they could ask you absolutely anything. They could make up some totally original, retarded question. They could say, "Tell me about a time that you had a conflict with your boss, but then in order to resolve it, you had to display creative thinking in a situation that you were uncomfortable and unfamiliar. Tell me about a time you did that. Go." It's like a lot of recruiters, they pat themselves on the back or on the shoulder, thinking they're so, amazing and insightful to be able to come up with these, variants of the same old questions again. And I mean, who has prepared themselves for something like that? It's a non-standard question. It's some like very specific variant of another question. Nobody prepares for that stuff. This is the kind of silliness you got to deal with, right? And because, you're out of your comfort zone, you're in a situation, you've got all these strangers staring at you. You're not on your home turf. You're on somebody's property in a weird room somewhere, and you don't feel very comfortable. Maybe you're just nervous about the whole thing. You're between jobs. You don't feel very confident at that moment, right? It's very hard to come up with some original thought. So what you do is you go down with all these, with like 10 stories that are pre-prepared. These are the ones you've rehearsed. They're on the tip of your mind, and then especially if you've done some mock interviews to help you prepare, go grab a friend or family member. Right? Like I've said before, go grab some person, that's loafing around the place where you live, maybe a roommate or, your family member, and say, hey, since you're clearly not doing anything with your life, why don't you come and help me rehearse for job interviews? You pretend to be the interviewer, and either I give you a list of questions or you come up with some questions, and, you ask me them and I'll answer you, and, we'll do this a couple of times and we'll see how I do, right? You could also ask them to give you feedback if you choose. You don't have to do that. It's mainly a test for you, right? Right? But that's a great way to prepare. The first step of preparing is like you learn all the answers to questions and stuff. You memorize them. Make sure you're familiar with what's on your resume, Then when you got that down, the second step is to do mock interviews. If you really want to be a pro at this, grab a friend, grab a family member, say, hey, look, I'll pay you $5 if you could like spend like an hour, or whatever, and some of these people being the cheapskates that they usually are, they'll probably go for it. Right. And this is good. This is good for you. Right. And then you drill like over and over. So when you get down to the interview, those 10 stories, you've practiced like pulling them out, you've said them multiple times, so you're familiar with them. You can say them in a very compact form so you don't blabber for 10 minutes like I'm doing, right? And then you will knock it out of the park. Art Sim says no skipping. Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know that, Art. I appreciate that. That's also good to hear. Art says, I'm going to be interviewing someone soon. My goal is to make the interviewee feel as comfortable as possible and make the questions easy. It doesn't help anyone to stump them. Yeah, so the way they do interviews generally at the executive level is they dispense with all this BS. You don't have recruiters. You don't have the stupid, like, cliched questions. So tell me about yourself. You don't have that crap. Like, so what are your weaknesses? Give me 3 of your biggest weaknesses. Right? Because that's how they interview people at sort of the worker level, like lower levels, right? Highly artificial situation. You know that you're, as an interviewer, that you're not getting honest, truthful answers. You're getting highly rehearsed, highly artificial answers. Sometimes they could be a complete lie, but you have no way of knowing, right? It's a terrible situation that they create. That's why a lot of these things come down to not what you say, but how likable you are and all that, because you could be falsifying everything that you say. And if you're good at it, they have no way of detecting it, right? So what you're describing, Art, that's like a more informal interview that you would do more for executives and stuff, which is a better way. And we have data on this. We have a much better way of really revealing who would be a better fit for the role. The problem, though, is that it's much more labor intensive Because to really get to know someone, you got to put in multiple hours talking to them. That's like not all in on one occasion, like, but you got to do multiple interviews. They've got to like be at ease talking to you. You got to talk about everything under the sun, you know, and you know what I mean? Like you go through their whole resume, you ask them about everything they've ever done and why, you know, and like what makes them tick, what's their philosophy for like, you know, how they approach problems and challenges and all this kind of stuff. You get to know them, right? Not really practical to do that if you're just hiring a bunch of minimum wage people, right? But they do this kind of thing at the executive level. It's that plus your track record. That's what gets you hired. Mainly the track record. But this is also a key part of it, right? And yeah, the goal is that you don't ask these stupid cliched questions that people are prepared for. You ask them about them. You ask them like, when you were here at this company, I know that you worked here. I know you were in this role. I know that you had this accomplishment. Tell me about that. And then they'll talk for half an hour. And then as they mention things, you know, they say like, well, you know, I wanted to do it this way. I wanted to take this approach. You say, why did you take that approach? You know? And like, that's where the insight begins. Like, okay, this is who this person is. This is how they think. This is the learning that the talent they bring to the table. This is where it comes from and what I'm getting, right? And then I think, okay, is that the type of approach that I think is going to lead to success in this role? Is that the type of person we should have here? You know? Very time-consuming process, but that's how you really get insight into who the person actually is and if they're going to be a fit. Or who's going to be a better fit, is really the question. Yeah, and in order to do that, you have to be very casual. You have to be like just having a free-flowing, two-way conversation where people don't have their game face on. They're just having an honest conversation as if you would have a conversation with your friend in a social situation. That's really what it's about. And they often do these things at like, cocktail parties, coffee shops, restaurants, things like this, where it's a sort of casual atmosphere, friendly atmosphere. People let down their guard. You wouldn't have these conversations in like a conference room somewhere, right? That's how they do this stuff, and with good reason. It's much more effective. It's just that it takes a long time. Jared says, thanks. Not so scared of the behavioral questions anymore. I'll be prepared. I have also prepared a 30, 60, 90-day plan to present to interviewers in hopes to show initiative. Is this a good move? Yeah, it can be. It's not necessarily bang on because you're assuming that that's what they want from you. It's conceivable that you present this big plan of like, okay, if I were to be hired, this is what I would try and do. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, I would do this, right? There's a chance they might be thinking, well, okay, you're making several assumptions and you're guessing what it's going to be like, and sorry, you're way off, right? Like we're going to explain this to you and we're going to take you through it. And we have our own plan of what we need you to show at 30, 60, and 90 days. There's a chance that you could encounter that, right? So I wouldn't prepare some big elaborate thing if they haven't shown any signs that they care about that, or they care about initiative, or they care, you know what I mean? You have to really judge the situation. If they ask you a question about if you got this role, what would you do? Or, how would you solve this problem that you're likely to encounter? Then you can weave that in and say well, what I would, without knowing the specifics, my default expectation is that at 30 days, I'd be doing this. 60 days, I'd probably be at this point. 90 days, I'd be here. That may vary, but that would be without being told anything different or given specific, details. I would probably follow something very similar to that. So it comes into the conversation, and then okay, they probably care about my position on this, right? I wouldn't advance anything to them that they haven't asked for in one form or another, because you're guessing that it's something that they want and you don't know, right? Like if they haven't said in the job description that, we're looking for this, and they haven't told you in person, that given any indication that we're looking for this, I wouldn't just suddenly tell them, okay, you're going to love this. I've gone ahead and I've done this whole thing for you, right? What do you think? Because you risk the fact that maybe they're not looking for that. They got their own thoughts on it. So it's good to have it in your back pocket. Weave it into the conversation if it comes up, but if it doesn't come up or nothing near it comes up, then don't just announce it to them, okay? That would be my default position on this. ArtSim says, I would love to be in an interview like that, a conversation about past practices. I've never been in one like that before. Yeah, they do that usually for roles where you're a decision maker. Like there's this kind of unofficial, informal kind of divide in a lot of organizations. It's like a watershed. At this level and up, you're a decision maker. And at, below that position, you're an order taker. Like you're told what to do and you do it, right? But at a certain position and up, you decide what's to be done. You decide how many people are needed in a team. You decide what their responsibilities should be. You decide how they should be doing their work, right? So for those roles, that's where this stuff is important, where you need to understand who the person is, how they make decisions. As I said, a big part of it is going to be their track record. Sometimes if a person is brilliant enough, they almost don't care whether they understand their mental processes. All they know is, hey, this person made the last company $20 million a year for this little specific thing that they did. We want that here. So I don't really care what they did. All I know is that they're capable of doing it, and I want them to do it here. I just want to make sure that this is kind of the same situation as what they were doing in the other place. But assuming that's the case, I'm expecting them to perform, But usually it's your due diligence to understand what makes the person tick. Do they do everything that they do? Do they model it on the first job where they saw that or something like that? Or do they understand there's a couple of different solutions and they choose one or the other depending on certain factors? That would be pretty important to know, right? So yeah, that's also the stage, by the way, where they don't put recruiters in the process. The recruiters are relegated to being essentially clerks that fill in paperwork and send out emails and stuff like that. They may ask them for their 2 cents when it comes to labor laws or standard hiring practices, but in terms of a decision of who to hire and how we're going to verify that, that's where they cut recruiters out of a lot of the process. Because what would recruiters know? They've never been in an executive role. How would they be able to tell which person would be a more appropriate executive for a specific role? You know what I mean? Even existing executives may not be able to tell, right? You know what I mean? But certainly recruiters would stand even less of a chance. So that's another fun fact about interviews at that level. They get rid of the recruiter. So you don't get asked idiot question what are your strengths? It's like, Jared says, haha, you sound absolutely right. I don't want to be too presumptuous. It's a goof thing. I asked you. Yeah, not a problem. It's a good thing I asked you. Okay, yes. Well, if you got something out of it, hopefully that's helpful. Art says, will getting an MBA assist in answering or understanding organizational issues in interviews for leadership? Yes. Yes, it will. Now, the degree that it does may vary depending on what they ask you and what leadership issues. But one of the things you study as part of an MBA is an area of study called organizational theory, or what else they call it? Organizational theory or organizational. The name escapes me. It's got two names. Organizational behavior. That's sometimes what people call it. Anyway, it's basically a little bit of psychology, a little bit of sociology, a little bit of business. And what they've done is they've sort of, it's almost like an area of sociology where they've studied how people behave in large groups, right? So one of the things you study there is like, power. Like, what is power? Power is the ability to get other people to behave as you wish, right? Like, for example, if you're the boss, you have to have power over your employees to get them to do what you say. If you say, I need you all to do this work and I need it done by this deadline, you don't want them to go, screw you. We'll do it when we feel like it. You need them to conform to that. You want them to show up for work in the morning. You want them to not quit, by the end of the week. You know what I mean? So like, you need to be able to so they study these things in a very sort of theoretical, formal way. And then, depending on the MBA program, I'm given to understand that in some places, like in some, highly reputable universities and stuff, you supposedly get people that come in that bring you a lot of practical knowledge on how you implement some of these things. Now, whether you do or not, that's kind of dubious, but the theory is the important thing. You will be able to apply the theory and you'll have your own experiences where you learn the practical side, okay? You don't depend on somebody else's practical experience. You form your own. It doesn't matter if somebody else can make some theory work. Can you? When it comes to how to communicate to people, are you good at doing that? Is it effective when you do it? That's the critical thing. So they give you the theory. And, so if you get theoretically in a job interview, you get a question about, organizational issues, right? You don't elaborate on what you mean precisely, but, you do mention leadership. So if they ask you a question about leadership, how would you, how would you get people to work together? Something like that, right? Well, if you understand the theory of organizational behavior, you'll be able to speak to that, certainly. Like, for example, there's one job interview question that you sometimes get asked if you're going for a management job. And the question is, what is your leadership style? That's the closest thing to a standardized question that they have at that level, according to me. And I've done a couple of videos over the years on how to answer that. And the answer can get very long, right? Because you would say like, well, I don't have one, go-to leadership style. I vary my leadership style depending on what's called for in the situation. And, I can do one of four things that I habitually do one of four things. This style, that style, this style, and that style. And you go into what they are and why you do them and why you would choose that one. It can get quite involved, right? But as you're saying this, hopefully the response is, oh, this person tends to know their stuff, right? So I don't have any fears now of hiring them and putting them in charge of a team of 50 people. They have direct reports and indirect reports. It seems like they can handle it. They know what to do. Right? So knowing the theory certainly helps. And the practice is usually not that hard if you know the theory. It's not that hard to do these things, like to tell people different things, right? You just need to know what to tell them, right? And why you would tell them that. You take an indirect approach instead of, a more direct approach or something like that. Hopefully that makes sense. That rambling sort of scattered kind of train of thought there that I just shared with you. Hopefully that shed some light on it. I'd like to think it does. I suspect it may be less coherent than it is in my head. I see there's 19 of you guys here. Thank you for joining me today. The title of this was Why the Hiring Process Sucks. And I mean, I envision talking more about more about that. You know, if you have any horror stories or your questions about like, why do they do this? I mean, I hate it when they do this, but they always do this and it doesn't make any sense. You know, that's what I envisioned it. If anyone has any stories like that, feel free to volunteer them. But it's all good. Art says, it does. I'm so excited to learn about organizational theory. Yeah, well, listen, okay, shameless plug, right? You can see it on the screen. I've got a course, okay, called the $100 MBA. And you probably can't see it clearly because I didn't place everything very well, but there's a link to it in the description box. If you're interested, if you're the type of person who takes courses, I created it because it has the best bang for the buck of anything I've seen out there. You see, the thing is, when you learn business, there's so much misinformation like up on the internet. And back in the days when I used to go to bookstores, like before the internet kind of all but eliminated bookstores, you know, there you look at the business book section, all these coffee table books, and you know, they were just crap. It's like the best of the bunch were books that were written by actual business people, like celebrity business people, where they just told the story of what they did to build their company or whatever, right? Those were probably the best of the bunch, but there's like a lot of books with people just preaching to you about this is how it works. And when it was something that I knew about, it was just absolute crap. It was just false, you know? So anyway, there's a lot of people being taken in by this. And like, for example, let me give you an example. A question that a lot of people have is people who want to be entrepreneurs. You know, I do a live stream called Side Hustle Ideas, where, you know, if whatever your situation, if you want to just start a side hustle, so you bring another revenue stream in, you make money through maybe a day job, but you want to bring in a little extra cash doing something on the side, okay? And the question is, well, how can I do that? You know, and something I've always advocated for is like, well, you know, when you start, it would probably be a good idea to learn business if you're going to try and do business. So at least learn the fundamentals, like the basics, you know, how business works. And that's where I thought of the idea of doing this course, by the way. But the problem was you would go to a bookstore or you go online and you'd listen to someone who seems like they know what they're talking about, and they'd be like a high-level accountant or something. Maybe they'd been the chief financial officer for a small business or something like that. And they're telling you all about like, well, here's how you start a company. And then you look at like what they're actually saying, and it's all about like how to incorporate your company, how to fill out all the paperwork, do the administrative stuff, how to register a name, and you know, like all these different. And it's like that doesn't tell you anything about like how to actually make money, which is the whole point of this in the first place, the fundamental component. Like, great, you got a registered company name, you've incorporated it, this is how you do your taxes now, but like, how do you actually make money? So it was just such misinformation. It was like, you know, that's not how you start a side hustle. You know what I mean? You don't have to do any of that. Like, what's the point of doing any of that stuff if you can't bring in any money? You know what I mean? So that's what I'm talking about. So I created this. All the fundamentals of business, and beyond the fundamentals, actually, what they teach in most MBA programs, it's been out in the public domain for a very long time. So schools saying, you know, we'll teach you this stuff for like, you know, $50,000, I think is unethical. It's like somebody saying to you, I will teach you grade 12 mathematics for $50,000. It's like, you don't need to spend $50,000 to learn grade 12 math. You can go buy a, you know, mathematics book that has the official curriculum in it. It's got problems, it's got solutions manuals. It's, you know, you just learn it, you do the work. A few months later, bam, you know it, right? Cost you $10 for the book. You just had to put in some time doing problems and learning the theory, right? That's basically my course, the $100 MBA. So you get a reading list of textbooks. You get a whole bunch of videos. I guide you through it. I don't teach you it. I'm using the textbook the same textbook they use in Harvard Business School in their MBA program to teach you accounting or marketing or organizational theory. We're just ordering that book from Amazon and you're reading it. And the beauty of taking a course like that with me is that, if you just want to skim it, you can. But if you really want to go in depth, you can do that also, right? It's really up to you, like how deep you want to go. Now, what's the catch? Well, the catch is that it's unaccredited because you don't have to do any assignments, any exams, any tests. There's no evaluations. So if you get nothing out of it, or if you get you spend a year with it, going really in depth, reading these textbooks from cover to cover, understanding everything, it's like, how would I know what you've got out of it? I don't care. This is for people who want to learn the material. They're not trying to impress somebody with a fancy diploma. Okay, if you want to do that, then there's plenty of other options out there. But if you just want to learn the material for its own sake, to help you be better at your day job, to help you make better decisions at work so you get promoted, to start your own business and do it successfully so you don't need a day job, this is the material for how to do that, right? So if this is interesting to you, there's a link in the description. I've also made a video where it's like an FAQ, like where I answer questions about the course, what you're getting, how it works. So, in the interest of transparency. So if that's of interest to you, check it out. I also do a weekly live stream called Side Hustle Ideas. I haven't done it for the last 2 weeks, but I'll be resuming that hopefully next week, where we talk about the business side of things. So check that out if you're interested in that. That's not really kind of the core of what we talk about here, but check that out. Okay, where did I leave off here? Art says, I think the worst thing that an interviewer can do is to act disinterested. This has happened to me before. That does not surprise me. This is one of my big complaints about the way recruitment and selection is done these days. Just a lack of professionalism, lack of respect. And I'm saying this because, first of all, I had experiences in the early part of my career like this. I had terrible experiences, like I'm sure some of you have had, where recruiters behave like total jackasses. They behave completely unprofessionally, disrespectfully, rudely. They do a terrible job of representing their organization. In some cases, it makes people want to never, ever work for them. And I've heard of cases where it inspires people to work for their competitor and put that company out of business, to try and put them out of business because they have this pathological hatred for them because of the way they were treated by recruiters when they applied for a job there years earlier. And I'm also going off the horror stories that people regularly tell me on this YouTube channel, in comments to videos and in live chats. It seems to be quite common that they're still doing this. And I can believe it because we tend to have generally sort of eroded manners and decency over the last 30 years. We've gone even further in that direction. So I can believe it. So you're at a job interview and the recruiter looks bored. They look like, they're just like, hello. If you had any interpersonal skills or social skills, you would know that you don't do that, right? That's extremely rude. Even if you are disinterested, you don't show it like that in such a blatant, overt way. David says, I noticed you mentioned not to advance anything beyond job descriptions. What about if you open a discussion For example, giving some possible solutions for the problems in the job description. Well, the obvious thing is, did they ask you for that? Look, I don't think I said, or it wasn't my intention to say, never advance anything beyond what they said in the job description. What I probably was going for was to say, you don't want to tell them a bunch of stuff, presumably that you think is great about yourself, that they're not looking for, that they don't agree is a great thing, right? So, for example, in a job description, a job posting, if they've said, we're looking for someone who's got this skill, right? They're signaling to you that they value the fact that you have that skill, right? They would consider it a good thing if they found out that you had that skill, right? Maybe in a job interview, they also say to you, this wasn't in the posting, but they say, oh, we value this trait or this education or this skill. Maybe somebody says, hey, I got your resume here and I see that you have this certificate. That's really useful. Tell me about it. What does that enable you to do? Or, I've heard of it, but I don't really know how you apply this or how you use this skill on the job. Can you help me understand? What's this about? Right? So they've signaled to you that they care about that they, presumably if you have that thing, that gives you points, right? So then you would talk about it, right? But my point is, I wouldn't go to a job interview and start telling them all about the certificate that you have and how great it is and how it helps you do this job better, if they haven't given you any indication at any point that they think that certificate is a good thing, right? Even if you think it's a good thing, if they haven't said it's a good thing, I would really be wary of advancing this, right? Because that's usually where people bomb interviews. They go on and on about something they think the other person wants to hear. In reality, the other person doesn't want to hear that. They don't even know what that thing is. They've never even heard of it before. They certainly are not looking for it, right? What they're wanting to hear from you is, do you have the things that they are actively looking for? That's all they want, right? If you go down there and start talking all about this new thing that you think is great, but they don't agree, even if you're right, and you probably are right, but they don't see it that way, it's counting against you. That's the reality. So how about if you open a discussion giving some possible solutions to problems in job description? If you're asked, if it comes up and they've indicated that they're interested in, or they value that, or they're interested in hearing that, sure, yeah, that might be great. But don't just volunteer it, assuming that they will consider that to be a good thing, right? They're looking for what they're looking for. Whether it makes sense or not, that's what they're looking for. The only way you convince them that you're the one that they should pick is if you have the things that they've decided are good and that they're actively looking for. Amaze says, could you share some insights on fake job ads, how to spot one and why companies do this? That's a big topic. I also did a video on that recently. It would make more sense just to go and watch the video. Bottom line, there's multiple reasons why they would. It's a natural thing that's a response to how easy it is to post a job and how many applicants you get for jobs. Okay. The most common thing that's going on there is they're doing labor market research. Okay, so they're just posting a job and there's no real job there. They just want to see how many people are qualified to do that job, that have the things in it. How many of them are looking for a job right now? And they may ask, more questions as part of the job application. They'll say what's your salary expectations? So then they get an idea of okay, if we wanted to hire someone with those things, how much money would that probably cost us? Like, would we have to pay for the employee, right? So they're getting all this data for free, right? Without, like, they're letting all the data come to them rather than them going out and conducting research and stuff to get it, right? So, I mean, it's depending on how they do it. Yes, I kind of agree. It is unethical, but it's a natural response to, like, they have the capability of doing this, so they're doing it, you know? I'm not defending them. I'm just saying that that's a thing, right? And the other thing is they can get around any legal kind of thing by saying, like, well, if somebody really good comes along, then, we could well hire them. But it doesn't mean that we're necessarily filling a position. We don't need to fill the position, but if the right person comes, then we could hire them, right? So they can get around a lot of legal requirements by doing that. Because there's nothing in the law of most countries that says, the government tells a company, you must hire this person. It's like, there's nothing like that. People can hire who they want in the same way that any individual can work for any company they want, certainly in the West. So, you know what I mean? So that's usually what's going on. Youssef, does that Matt's book for business exist? What? Well, you're mixing two things. I gave an example likening learning something to learning grade 12 math. My point was that just like if you wanted to learn grade 12 mathematics, that's in the public domain. Nobody owns that. You don't have to pay any licensing fees. Many people have written textbooks on, grade 12 mathematics, how to learn it and all the practice problems and all that kind of stuff. So my point is that it's out there. And I was comparing that to the fundamentals of business. That is also out in the public domain. Nobody owns it. Nobody has to pay licensing fees. Many people have written textbooks on business, the various business areas. You can order those books on Amazon, for very cheap, for like, whatever a book costs. But you can also get slightly older editions that have like, different pictures in them and things for very cheap, like $5, $10. You can do that. So it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to get the material, right? You then have to then read the material, and in some cases do a little bit of work, like in the accounting area, for example. It's almost useless just reading the material. You have to then do a few problems to really hammer it in, like how this stuff actually works. Most people do anyway. So, but that's all out there. So like you can do it. It just, the question is knowing what to learn. And so that's what I've packaged in that MBA course, right? I have an MBA. I'm a big believer in MBA. I got my MBA after I was a CEO. And then I realized like some of the mistakes I'd made. But it's all out there. So the point I was making was that I think it's a little unethical for universities and things to charge people like $50,000 US for an MBA, and even like, charging lots of money for an online MBA, it's like, what are you paying for? You're paying for access to like this material that's already out in the public domain that you could just, if you knew where to look, you could just order it yourself and read it yourself, and you would get the same result. You wouldn't have the official piece of paper. You wouldn't have the diploma, but you'd have the knowledge. So if you're just looking for the knowledge, that's what my course is for, right? Micah says, I just got done interviewing someone. I'm a recruiter. Okay, great. Brian says, I agree with Bill. Not to volunteer info, it can open a can of worms. Yeah. Yeah, they want the things that they are looking for, and they don't want it diluted with a bunch of other things that they're not looking for. That is true of your resume. That is also true in interviews, right? So if they're hiring someone to stack boxes, they want to know that you're fit, that you're reliable, that you're someone that that they can work with. Like you understand that this person is going to be telling you what to do and you have to do what they say, right? That can follow rules and, like there's like a bit of a list of things, right? But then you interview people and somebody says, but I have a degree in biology, the thing about the biology is that you have to be very disciplined to learn biology. You got to do assignments and show up for class and all this. And, I think that says something about my character that will show you that I'm the right person to stack boxes for you. Now, none of that is false. But if you go on and on and on about the fact that you volunteer the fact that you've got this degree in biology, will that help you get the job stacking boxes? No. You talked for 2 minutes about what we care about, and you talked for 28 minutes about like all these things that we're not actively looking for, we don't consider really that necessary. So at the end of the day, it kind of counts against you that you volunteered all the stuff about your biology degree. You seem to be more into biology than you are into stacking boxes. You might not be a great fit for this role, Or I don't think you're going to be satisfied stacking boxes if we hire you, because it seems like your passion is biology and your talent is biology, and this is not biology. I don't think you're going to want to be here for the long term, So that's what they're looking for, and it can be very hard to handle this. Because the ego is real. We all want to put stuff on there on our resume or in our interview. We want to brag and say, hey, you don't seem to get it. I did this. Do you realize like what that says about me? I'm going to be the most reliable employee you've ever hired or something. But the problem is they don't value that. They're not looking for that. And from their perspective, it's a distraction. It takes away, So this can make it kind of tricky. On the one hand, you want to impress them, but on the other hand, you don't want to like guess that they will see the value in it like you do, only to find that you think it's great and maybe you're right, but for whatever reason, they don't share that view. And so all this great stuff you said, it ended up counting against you. Someone after the job interview, the boss will talk to the interviewer and say, how was that last candidate? And the interviewer will say, well, I don't know, they were okay, but they kept going on and on about their biology degree. It's like, we're not looking for a biology degree. I don't care about biology. And he's like, yeah, that probably doesn't sound like the person we want. Right? Like that's what it was reduced to, Youssef said, you said something very interesting about the power game you'll have to play in business. Did I? Any tips on how to get better in that power dynamic? Yeah, we'll learn business. If you want to be in business, like you want to be a decision maker, like towards the top, learn business, right? I'd say that for anything. If you want to be in whatever profession, learn your craft, learn the profession you're in. Okay. So like, for example, if you work in a plumbing company and you're a plumber's apprentice, you've kind of helped around for many years. You've worked in the stock room for many years. So you know all the materials, all the parts, you've hung out with plumbers for many years. You know what I mean? Like you're such a useful person because you've seen so much and you've been there forever. Right? But the thing stopping you is that you're not a plumber. You don't have your official Red Seal ticket, whatever certification in plumbing. So, imagine if you tack that on. You're a fully qualified plumber that's licensed to practice, but you've got 20 years experience working in a plumbing business. You've done every job. You've been in the stock room for many years, the inventory, warehouse, whatever. You know every part. Like imagine how much more valuable you'd be. So whatever you're in, yeah, you got in based on experience, but maybe get the credentials too. And then you could really clean up. Like that's just a general rule. There are exceptions depending on the situation, but that's kind of the general rule. Learn your craft. And then no one could ever have an issue with there's no obstacle to seeing you're qualified. right? What I mentioned earlier, I think that you might be referring to is there are different areas of business. One of them, like there's marketing, there's accounting, there's finance, all these different areas. One of them of about 10, 1 out of 10, is an area called organizational theory or organizational behavior. That's what I was talking about earlier. And that's where they study like how people behave in organizations. So the cool thing about that topic is that if you've been an employee for years, you've seen people do a lot of things that don't seem to make sense. Like, for example, I'll give you a common one. Let's say there's an employee that, they don't listen to the boss, right? The boss says, I need everyone to report for work at this time every morning, or there'll be consequences, right? And this employee says, whatever. And they don't show up on time that day. But there doesn't seem to ever be any consequences for them. They don't get fired, or anything like that. And you're thinking like, that doesn't make any sense. And then you observe another employee, maybe a newer employee. They've only been with the company 6 months. They decided not to show up that day too, and they were fired. And you think, well, wait a minute. Like, okay, what's this double standard going on here? Now, some people might falsely conclude, that older employee is friends with the boss. That's why the boss is not taking them to task over, disobeying their instructions. But that's not actually what's going on. What's actually going on, it turns out, is that older employee, they're the only one in the entire place that know how to use a certain piece of equipment, maybe a critical piece of equipment. Only that employee knows how to use it. So even though the boss is technically in charge, right? They have the authority. That employee actually has the power because the boss is dependent on that employee for this production process to work, right? So the employee can say, now we're not going to be done. We're not going to do it in 1 day. We're going to need 3. And then the boss says, well, I don't think it takes 3 days. And then you look at how it plays out. Well, they did it in 3 days. And you're thinking like, how does that happen? Right? So you learn that, power is based not off of authority, but it's also based on dependency. Maybe you need that person for something. In this case, it was access to a capability, a piece of equipment. It might be, there's other types of dependency where, you need that person as access to popularity or friendship or other things that you want, right? And because of that, they have power over you, right? You're not going to discipline them or anything like that. Even though technically you could, you would end up the loser. You would not win that battle, right? So it explains some of the weird things that you see happening in a workplace that don't seem to make sense unless you understand these principles that are at play, right? So like that's organizational theory. You learn, it's one of the more interesting areas of business. So, so that's a component of my course. I mean, it's a component of any MBA program. You can look it up on Wikipedia, like just go look for organizational theory or organizational behavior. It's an area of study. It's quite a fascinating area. It includes communication and how to manage things and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Art Sim says, I often feel smarter than my boss. Yeah, well, it could, you never know. It could be the reality, right? Or it could be an illusion. Maybe you don't see what your boss is required to do by their boss, right? Their boss is saying all these things that you think would be important. Their boss is saying those don't matter. I only care about this. So make sure that's there, that's in place, and you're fine. Right? You see, so like this is the thing, there's different perspectives. Sometimes we assume that someone should care about this or do certain things in a certain way, and then they don't, and then you always conclude, well, they're an idiot. Well, that's not actually what's going on. What you don't realize is that they're given certain incentives and priorities, and they're not what you think they should be or what you think they are, right? And then that explains what's actually going on. There's a lot of that in business. And it's stuff they can't admit too. That's why you don't know about it. Because if they said things like, well, we really don't care who we hire as long as, they show up for work and they can do a couple of basic things. We really don't care. Like, would that surprise you if that was the reality? Have you seen some of the hiring practices? We're not looking for the best candidate. We're looking for the least risky candidate. Two completely different things, right? One would assume the technical skills and qualifications are important, right? But yet, they're putting hiring decisions in the hands of recruiters who don't understand the first thing about the technical skills and only care about like psychological aspects of it. And the psychological aspects that you can tell in a job interview, which is very brief and highly artificial, right? It's not what you think it should be. So anyway, I'm not trying to sell people on you must learn business, but I'm just saying if you're interested in that, that's organizational theory. It helps explain a lot of the weirdness you see, And then when you learn it, you go, oh, of course, that's why everything operates like this. But there's actually reasons for it that you were unaware of. Anyway. Okay, well, I have to sign off pretty soon. So if anyone has any last minute questions, there's 13 people here. Let me know. This is your moment of glory. Your moment of, what do they call it? Your apotheosis. The pinnacle, the climax of your entire life, right here. Yeah. It's all downhill from here. But no, there's a lot of things that don't make sense, and there's a lot of things that are just ridiculous. And, a lot of times, one factor it comes down to is long-term gain versus short-term gain. People care about short-term gain. Most people, for whatever reason, to their detriment, don't care about long-term gain. And that explains a lot of what we see in hiring. You've heard about it where recruiters and hiring managers, they don't want to hire someone that makes them look bad, right? They don't want to hire someone so brilliant that that person like guns for their job or makes them look inferior by comparison, right? There's all kinds of things going on. Anyway, so just to try and wrap this up, I'm going to say that if you are between jobs right now, you're looking for a job, okay, this process can be extremely aggravating. It can be very disheartening. And a lot of that stems from the fact that it's just confusing as to what the hell's actually going on, why people are doing things this way, and just some blanket advice. You guys that are regulars, you know this already, but make sure that you're not just trying to get a job by looking at publicly posted jobs on the internet, right? All the job postings out there, like I said earlier, they're 20% of all the jobs that are actually out there. The other 80% are there, but they're not advertised. They're not posted publicly because they don't need to be posted publicly. Learn networking. Now, don't take my word for this. Don't take anyone's word for anything. Go and do your own research. Okay, look into this. You'll see that this is a huge thing. And this is a good thing because you can make it work for you. Okay, learn some very basic principles of networking. You don't need to know anybody. You don't need to know a million people. You don't need to know anyone. You could be an introvert. You can do this over the internet if you choose to. Okay? Whether you're an extrovert or an introvert or whatever you got, you can make it work for you. But it's very real. And if you're ignoring it, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. Take advantage of it. Learn about it. I put some resources in the description box of this video. There's one video called The Hidden Job Market. There's another video called How Successful People Get Jobs. Check those out. And as I say, I'm not asking you to take my word for anything. Go and do your own research. And the best learning is by doing, okay? So if you want to go deeper, there's videos there, but you can also get that. I go into much greater detail here in that course. Other than that, I will be back on Monday with more live streams. I'm going to answer the last couple of questions very quickly, and then that'll probably be it. Youssef said, also, how can people be like that? People then have to say those specific things that would get them what they want, but under the surface, it's all a lie. Both people know the other person isn't truthful. I'm not sure precisely what you're talking about. If you're talking about job interviews, like how fake everybody acts in a job interview, you're absolutely correct. The reason people do it is because the alternative to doing job interviews like the way they're doing it is very, very time consuming. It's very labor intensive. You would have to spend 4 hours with a candidate to really get them to know them properly, get them to drop their guard, have like an honest and open conversation about stuff. The other thing is that they can't always be honest about things on their side. They just can't. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things at play, right? That being said, I still think that a lot of recruiters do a crappy job. They're rude, they're disrespectful. I mean, you look at ghosting, right? There's absolutely no need for that to be as prevalent as it is, where the recruiter ghosts candidates. It's ridiculous. So there's a lot of things at play there. I've gone into it in the past. I'll go into it next time if people want me to. But thank you to the people who participated. You guys asked some very intelligent questions, made some great points. I will be back on Monday with more live streams. I do it on Monday and Wednesday. Check out my courses. Check out my other channels if you want more, like the clips of live streams and things like this, where it's usually a little more coherent than the one I did today. And I wish you nothing but the best for the future. The more you learn, the more self-improvement you do, the better you will do, okay? Never stop learning. You guys are awesome. I'll see you soon. Take care.